Here's Drake Toll.
Welcome back into the Petty Clinic Low T Bears Den. Happy afternoon, everybody, on Thursday. Thursday, it's all one and the same, whether you're in Guam or the Continental 48. It is Thursday today. Breaking down football from this past weekend, that was J.D. Pickell, Malik Zaire there in that segment. A big interview. Malik Zaire, one of the better quarterbacks that we've seen in college football the last couple of years, one of the bigger names as well. I firmly believe that after this weekend, the Baylor Bears have found their quarterback. Baylor football, Dave Aranda in season number 2 after going 2-7 last season. The big storyline this offseason. Who's the quarterback? You got Gary Bohannon, Jacob Zeno, Blake Shapen, and Kyron Drones. Yeah, I had plenty of takeaways from the game on Saturday, and there wasn't an offensive show. I wanted to see an offensive show. I'm used to spring games where the one offense takes on the 4 defense and just explodes for 50 yards. But you didn't get that. And I'm glad that Coach Dave Aranda, Jeff Grimes, and company set it up to where it was a competitive game on Saturday, and you got to see the best of the defense go against pretty much the best of the offense, and Baylor tried to figure things out. You could tell that Treston Ebner has played at an elite level of college football. Treston Ebner has played in a Sugar Bowl. Treston Ebner has played in a Big 12 championship game. His experience was on display. His speed, physicality was on display as well. Abram Smith got north and south. Quaylen Jones. These guys looked good. There were a lot of players that I thought looked good. Josh Fleeks, not bad. A couple of solid plays from Josh Fleeks. R.J. Sneed. A couple of solid plays from Tyquan Thornton. But I do want to give credit, put a spotlight on the quarterback battle. Jacob Zeno went out on Saturday, and Zeno threw 2 interceptions on his first 2 drives. First series, an interception by freshman linebacker Tyrone M. Brown. Junior quarterback Al Walcott intercepted the second one from Jacob Zeno. That immediately, for me, I'm thinking, we've had this conversation. Jacob Zeno can't lose the job solely based on the spring, and I would agree with that. It's not like he can walk in, lose the job based off of what he did out there in spring ball and spring game. However, I think a serious conversation has to be had over how Zeno looked in comparison to Gary Bohannon. Because I'll tell you this, Jacob Zeno went out and played poorly in comparison to how you want your starting quarterback at an elite level in the Big 12 to play. Yes, he played against a solid defense. However, Jacob Zeno, this big quarterback, bred to be a starter, going to be elite, he's got it between the ears, went out and threw 2 interceptions. Quickly, off the boot. Your first live action of the spring in front of fans and the stadium, and you throw 2 picks. So then you think, okay, if Zeno, the one, is throwing 2 picks, then one can only assume that Gary Bohannon, one can only assume Blake Shapen and Kyron Drones are going to do the same. I was not wholly impressed with Blake Shapen on Saturday. I think he's got smaller size. He is a baseball player in a football uniform. He's got baseball mechanics with his legs, and he throws the football as if he's coming across from shortstop and gunning it to first base. I think Shapen's got a lot of upside, but he's a small guy. Baylor's got a big offensive line. It's a big, big team. Doesn't mean they're physical yet. Doesn't mean they're strong yet and can really run the trenches, but they're a big team. And there was at least once or twice where you could tell the offensive line got in Shapen's way because of his size. One of his final passes thrown off the back of the helmet of an offensive lineman. Another takeaway, before we get to who I think Baylor's quarterback is going to be and needs to be, another takeaway, Kyron Drones is huge. Kyron Drones is listed right now, his last high school listing was 6'2", 195. I think Kyron Drones, from what I saw on a football field, 6'3", maybe 6'4". I mean, he looked tall in comparison to his line too, which I loved, and that guy looks beefy, like a 215. Maybe 220. I mean, he looks like he has put on some legit muscle. He was the biggest quarterback that stepped on the football field. I think Kyron Drones could be the future. If he doesn't see playing time this next season, I'll be surprised. But I want to take the attention now to Jacob Zeno and Gary Bohannon. Gary Bohannon, based off of what we saw in the spring game on Saturday, based solely off of that, should be the quarterback, should be the starting quarterback next season, period. Based not just off of the spring game. Gary Bohannon should be the starting quarterback for Baylor next season as well. I think all things considered, spring practices, spring game, and the entire body of work that Gary Bohannon has put together should be considered when listing your starting quarterback for Baylor come next season. I want to take you back to the 2019-2020 football season for Baylor. And Gary Bohannon was the guy that stepped into situations for Baylor where they needed someone to take over for Charlie Brewer because Charlie Brewer was hurt. Remember the concussions. Charlie Brewer had plenty of injuries across that entire season, and you just knew, okay, there are going to be games and times, which there were, where he wasn't able to go. That happened. And who stepped up into those situations? Gary Bohannon. Look at the Kansas State game that season. Look at the Oklahoma State game. A couple of games where you needed somebody to finish things off or somebody to come in and win. Kansas State specifically, you're on the road. Gary Bohannon comes in the game after Charlie Brewer gets hurt, leaves a drive that solidifies the game, that wins the game for Baylor. Gary Bohannon has that kind of experience. Yes, we've been over this. Jacob Zeno threw 2 great passes in the Big 12 championship, but I strongly believe that Zeno is not ready to take the helm of this program, be an elite starting quarterback for the Baylor Bears. Do I think Jacob Zeno could walk into Oklahoma right now and be pretty solid, maybe all Big 12 selection? I do. Here's why. The difference in physicality, the difference in offensive line, the difference in weapons. Baylor does not have the weapons of an Oklahoma where you can take a pocket passer like Jacob Zeno, because I don't trust Jacob Zeno's legs. He's a thin guy. I don't trust him yet with his legs, although he made a couple of decent plays with them on Saturday. I don't trust him enough to sit him back there and say, okay, make a play when the pocket collapses. I don't. In my analysis, Jacob Zeno, if he's got a great offensive line, can stand back there, be a Trey Lance-style quarterback that stands up tall, throws the football, could be fine, but you don't have that at Baylor. That's not what exists at Baylor. Instead, you have an offensive line that's spotty, that you're going to need grad transfers to come in, and if they don't come in, especially if they don't come in, you need a quarterback who is his own offensive line. Listen to that. Hear me. Gary Bohannon is his own offensive line. Gary Bohannon creates plays when there's not a play there. Gary Bohannon is a running back quarterback mix, a pure dual threat quarterback that can make things happen with his legs. He's an electric runner. He's got a ton of speed, a ton of size, and Gary Bohannon can make things happen. He's a playmaker more so than Jacob Zeno. The pocket's going to collapse more often than not this next season. There's not an offensive line. Charlie Brewer couldn't create much off of that. He only had 5 rushing touchdowns in his last season at Baylor University, and he's typically that guy that's going to run the football well. Charlie Brewer's had a ton of rushing touchdowns in the past. Well, when the offensive line breaks down, you need something different, right? You need something different. And Gary Bohannon is different in the best way possible when it comes to making things happen with his legs, being a playmaker with his legs, and getting into the game in big moments and capitalizing. I take you back to Kansas State where Gary looks good. All right. Point at that 2019 season, he went 17 for 36, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. No interceptions, mind you. No interceptions. That's a 109 quarterback rating. He only threw 1 pass in 2020. He was 1 for 1 for 7 yards. 158 quarterback rating. Nice. But that 2019 year, what he did with his legs, 42 rushes, 267 yards. That would have been good for like 3rd or 4th on the team rushing last season, all season. 3 touchdowns. I truly thought that Gary, and in his experience, has shown that he can play quarterback at the level where Baylor needs right now. Is he a Heisman contending quarterback? I don't think so. Is he a playmaking quarterback? Yes. A playmaking quarterback that fits Baylor because what he can do with his legs. Because I'm telling you, there will not be an offensive line. There will not be an offensive line this coming season that can protect a pocket passer, that can protect a guy like Jacob Zeno, that is much more one-dimensional than Gary Bohannon is. Gary Bohannon is versatile in the way that he can carry the football. He's got a decent arm, not a great arm, but a decent arm that can make plays when he needs to. And there were a couple times, we saw it in the game, 3rd and long, where he's throwing a strike down the middle of the field. He's got great zip on the football, and I'm telling you, his legs are like tree trunks. The guy is a big football player, and I do believe Baylor has found its quarterback in Gary Bohannon. If you are coming out as Jacob Zeno against your own team, pressure's not really on in the spring game unless you're the Ole Miss offensive lineman. Pressure's not offensive line coach, I'm sorry. Pressure's not really on. You're not going to win or lose a job that emphatically in Baylor's, in anybody's spring game. But Gary went out there with the pressure. Jacob Zeno went out there with the pressure off, threw 2 interceptions. Could have been 3 interceptions for Zeno. You got a great wide receiving core. You're not even playing against the ones on defense. Granted, Gary wasn't either. But I want to see I want to see Gary Bohannon run out there game 1 against Texas State early September in San Marcos next season, because I think Gary Bohannon will be the guy who can create, who can make the most plays, who can do it the best for Baylor going into this next football season because of the way that he moves, the way that he makes something out of nothing. Baylor needs a quarterback. 2 things. Baylor needs a quarterback who can make something out of nothing, and Baylor needs a quarterback who can be his own offensive line, who doesn't need a line to make plays. Gary Bohannon is both of those things, and I firmly believe where he is right now that Jacob Zeno is not either of those things yet. I like Zeno. I think he's got a lot of potential, but he's not there yet. And with his current system, I don't think he's going to fit that yet. Yes, Jeff Grimes, you want a player like Zach Wilson who can sit in the pocket and launch it. And I think Jacob Zeno can do that, but you don't have the personnel, you don't have the offensive line to ask someone to do a 4-step, 5-step, 7-step drop back, go deep in the pocket and try to launch a football because they're just not going to have time. They're not going to have time to sit in the pocket at all with the offensive line that currently is at Baylor University and with Baylor football. You only have maybe 2 guys that are a lock to start on the line, and that, with it being April 29th, is not a good sign. Jacob Zeno cannot create like Gary Bohannon can, and Gary showed he's got a little bit more age and experience. He's got experience in big games and winning big games, and I do believe that the Jacob Zeno nation that has become Baylor football fans that are all, yeah, Jacob Zeno, yeah, turn your attention to Gary Bohannon. Lock into Gary Bohannon and understand that Gary Bohannon might just be the starter game 1 in San Marcos against Texas State. And when he is, if that comes and happens, everybody should be on the GB11 train, baby, because Gary can win football games. Gary can be a legitimate starting quarterback and win football games. I say you start the hype train right here, right now for Gary Bohannon to be Baylor's starting quarterback next season, because from what I have seen so far, full body of work, Baylor has found its quarterback, and his name is Gary Bohannon, and I'm happy about it. I am happy about it because Gary can create. I'm Drake Toll. That's Armstrong Sims. When we come back from this break, we got a couple of different things that are in the works right here. Possibility of having Mike Neighbors, University of Arkansas. And I know that's been a tricky get for us in the last couple of days. We're working through some stuff, a lot of stuff with him, and some issues technically on his end. So we're hoping to get that. If not that, I'm going to open it back up to the mailbag on SicEm365.com on the forum, where we talked about who the future women's basketball coach is at Baylor. There are still a lot of questions and comments that I've not gotten to on there. And if Mike Neighbors is not able to join us, we'll open up the phone lines, 254-339-1122. Call us or text us. You can text with your thoughts today as well, and we'll get to those and answer any question or topic that you may have or want to hear about on Uptempo today. Thanks for watching. If you're watching out there on Twitter, make sure you go to YouTube, log in on YouTube, subscribe to SicEm365, download the SicEm365 app. You can connect Uptempo to your car, listen while you're driving, listen at work, connect it to your Bluetooth, whatever works best for you. We want it to work for you. I'm Drake Toll. That's Armstrong Sims. When we come back, more talk about Baylor and its current search for a women's college basketball coach. This, don't go anywhere, is Uptempo.
It's official. Basketballer James Akinjo, who was announced last week he would transfer